You are listening to Exploring Clean Energy, where we uncover the ideas, innovations, and projects powering our sustainable future. I'm Andy Marsland. Welcome to the show. I'm thrilled to welcome our guest today, Nathan Blundell, who's the Chief Development Officer at Windlab. Very warm welcome, Nathan.
Thanks for having me, Andy. Happy to be here.
So Windlab are one of the leading renewable energy development companies here in Australia. Perhaps we can start at a high level, Danny. Can you explain to the listeners and the viewers who is Windlab?
Yeah, definitely. So Windlab was formed around 2003 at the CSIRO. So we developed a software called Windscape that found best wind sites in the country, around the world, and it started there. And actually, we've played a part in around 25% of all wind farms that have been established in Australia. So really proud history. We're 100% Australian grown, and from that, we've really built out our capability to deliver, best-in-class projects across the NEM. One of the key things about who we are, we're fully integrated across the value chain, which means we don't just look at development. The humble days are when we looked at wind maps and things like that, which, the mapping we did got a lot more accuracy than the common public wind maps. So we now do that still, the prospecting side of things, but we do all the way through the development to the financial close, into construction, then into operation. So that full integration of a value chain is really powerful and quite unique in the industry sometimes. We've got a 20 gigawatt pipeline, which is, it sounds huge. Large.
Yeah,
yes.
I was going to say,
everyone's got large numbers these days because the projects are just getting bigger. That's the opportunity. Scale's really coming into the industry at the moment. So almost overnight, we went from megawatts to gigawatts. And so that's exciting. One of our pioneering, first projects we built as in that new model was Kennedy Energy Park. That was a world first at the time out of Hewenden. So it's a hybrid. It was a world first wind, battery and solar hybrid plant. It's often one of the best performing wind farms on the NEM, so we're really proud of that. But that's an example of some of the things Windlab has been able to do through that innovation and really build on that.
Mm-hmm. And when did that become operational?
So that was built in 2015, became operational in 2018, 2019. It's on, again, some places in the grid. It's one of the weaker parts of the grid, so there's some challenges there from a grid connection, but it's still one of the highest performing assets on the NEM.
Yeah. And I know we're going to jump around all over the place with the discussion today, but perhaps for the listeners, could you kind of explain the development life cycle, how long it takes from having an idea as such or, through the kind of testing period and then into development and execution? Yeah,
for sure. It varies, I guess. There's a fair bit of risk in the development phase and a bit of uncertainty. And it all really depends on the site. So no site is the same. It can take, the quickest you could probably move is around 5 years, but it wouldn't be crazy to take 10 years to develop from start to finish. And normally the first bit of it is changing. What used to be acceptable as a development pathway, 5 years ago, isn't acceptable anymore from how you develop, whether that be from an approvals or social license point of view. But that doesn't necessarily delay your development if you get it right from the start. So one of the things Windlab's really focused on is doing renewables the right way and really raising the bar as to how you deliver it. And that means doing the right thing early, not waiting until we have to do it or until we're asked to do it. So a lot of that early engagement is finding the right site, securing the land, but at the same time thinking about how you're assessing that site from a multi-criteria point of view, whether it be wind, environmental, social, cultural, and then engaging with stakeholders quite early. That's really important. That de-risks and allows you to move quite quickly then through those approvals and engagement requirements to get to financial close. It depends on which markets and approval processes as well, how long that takes to get approval and how expensive it is to get approval. But it'd be very surprised if you could get from that very start to close in any shorter than 5 years. It's quite challenging.
How many years of data do you generally need?
Oh, you just need, it varies. You always need more data, Andy. For respect to my wind engineers, they always want more data. But I think that's one of the great value of having something like Windscape that we use. We're quite sure of the resource when we get to the site. So we're not taking a punt and throwing a data at a map and saying, let's test here and see if the wind's any good. We generally know it's good. So it's in finding out what's the finer details of that wind resource, and it's more the micro wind resource on the site, where the turbines need to go. And that really helps us. We do that through remote sensing like LiDARs, and then we'll put met masts in. So the met mast data is around the bankability. You need that about 12 months before close, but the sooner you get it, then it helps with things like turbulence and site assessments with OEMs.
Yes, you mentioned about the early engagement with the stakeholders and the community. What's been the approach that you've taken? Is that community meetings, or how do you go about that, kind of step by step?
Yeah. Firstly, I'd say it's not a cookie cutter approach. Each site is different. Each community is different. So we need to approach it in that way. Kind of stepping back a bit. Well, I entered the industry in 2021 with Windlab, and it was just when it's really taking off, I guess, with a lot more activity. And there's a lot of parallels to other kind of infrastructure resource development kind of booms we've seen in the past. So Windlab's taken an approach where you need to do things a bit differently, how it was being done. So previously it was done on the proximity principle, just talk to the people you have to talk to in the immediate vicinity, landholders, maybe immediate neighbours if they can see it, local councils if you have to. Whereas we took more of a regional approach because these projects are getting so big and there's more of an expectation from communities and regional partners that you need to be engaging a bit more widely. So we took that initiative and now we look at a broader spectrum and we engage a lot earlier than you would normally. So that's around from the start. You need to probably engage a bit sooner than the industry generally would have previously, and that takes a bit of vulnerability. So it means you have to take a bit of risk. So you need to offer something to community. And the first thing, I guess, the key step in all of this, whether it's a town hall or a drop-in session, the key thing is listening. If engagement's all about just telling people something, that's not actually engagement. The key thing about engagement is listening. Secondly, giving the staff the skills and the time to do it properly. If you're approaching it as a business, as a tick box, that's not actually engagement either. Engagement is actually going out there with the right people who have the skills to engage, talk and listen, and bring that back to business and really take that on board as part of the development process. So we have all different forms of engagement, whether it be through newsletters, phone calls, but drop-in sessions are really good. Talking with regional partners, they're really important. Depending on the areas you're in, it's really engaging with the regional partners who can then help you engage with the broader community. That can be education institutions. Obviously, local government are key partners for us, so really engaging with them early. But then also chambers of commerce, regional enterprise organisations. One of our projects, Bungaburn in the Western Downs, Surat Basin Enterprise, Tisby.
Inland Queensland for everyone listening, even further afield.
They're a really strong organisation. So things like that will help you. And then broader, you can also engage with conservation groups and things like that that are in the region as well. So they understand the country fairly well as well. So, and then obviously traditional owner groups, really making sure we're moving beyond what we have to do under cultural heritage and native title legislation, but really looking to them as key stakeholders and engaging early with them to ensure that they've got a say as to what's happening on country and really feel bought into what we're doing. And something in Gawara, Baya, it's a North Queensland project where we've been able to work with the traditional owners of Gugabarden on an Indigenous land use agreement, ILUA, and that's where they've been really able to play a role in environmental stewardship and get a lot of training and employment opportunities for the project.
Sounds like you guys are going above and beyond, which is great to hear. I think you used the phrase like raising the bar, so that that's fantastic, and commend you on that. What are some of the common concerns then from the communities that you're hearing?
Again, it's not going to be
cookie cutter.
It varies, right? I think the way I'd frame it when asked this question is it's generally not specific to the technology or the wind, whether it's wind, solar, battery. The main thing we're managing is change. Like any main infrastructure project, you're going out and talking about something that's going to change their community. And so the main concern is, what are the impacts going to be? How is this going to change my day to day? What are the impacts on me and my community? And so the main concerns is the impacts of those changes. And then, okay, if there's impacts, are there benefits? And how are we going to make sure those benefits are targeted at the right place in the community? So that's generally the main train of thought when we're engaging and listening. And then also when's it going to happen, which is really hard. And it's one of the challenging things, and we'll probably talk to it too, about certainty of that timeline, that 5 to 10 years I talked about. Some of that is out of the developer's control. So I think if any developer had they would want to go as quickly as possible from start to finish. Unfortunately, a lot of things that take a bit longer isn't due to decisions made by the developer, but things out of their control, like approvals processes. And so that not just frustrates the developer, it frustrates the community, because they want to know when's this going to happen. And you can't tell them exactly when it's going to happen because you're exposed to external processes, whether it be approvals or grid. And so you can't tell them when it's going to happen. So that'd be one of the biggest concerns, because there's a lot of consultation fatigue happening. There's a lot of work happening, not just renewables, but there's resource projects, infrastructure projects. The community, you need to be really efficient with that engagement, and you need to give them accurate, timely information.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies don't kind of appreciate looking outside their own immediate industry. And I guess in parallel to that, the importance of making sure things get done right and done correctly. Because it's not just, if something went wrong with Windlab and their community engagement, it's not just Windlab, the whole wind industry kind of gets tarnished by that view, isn't it?
We manage a number of strategic risks, for our business. And I'd say from a social license, it's not just what we do, it's what the industry does, which is why we do things like podcasts or speak at conferences and around raising the bar, because we're only as strong as our weakest link as an industry. And so, a significant impact we've had on our projects generally hasn't been due to our behaviour or what we've been doing. It's because of other projects or whether it be renewables or they've done something that has then caused distrust or caused misinformation to come through. And so definitely we need to work together as an industry and do better, raise expectations through regional organisations, localised and even state-based organisations like Queensland Renewable Energy Council, and really set the expectation of what it means to be a good developer and engaging properly. But there is other things that are going to impact us as well, because natural disasters, obviously, communities have, like I said, they're all different. So they've got their regional economies. So you've really got to understand that context before going out there and talking about a big project. So it's really important to you as a developer, but there's a lot of things happening in regional communities, regional Australia, and you've got to understand that context. And when it goes to individual landholders, it's understanding the agricultural, generally, challenges that they're seeing in the market. So, and that's what I mean about having the right people going out there to have those discussions. So generally people have knowledge of agriculture industries. I love engineers, but I'm not sending an engineer out there to talk to a landholder or the community. They might be there to talk about technical sides, but as I said, the listening part, you need to have people that have trained and qualified to be able to do that.
Yes, yeah. The approvals process, so EPBC process, how have you been finding that over previous years? And is it improving in terms of the speed and the efficiency of working through that process?
I don't think we've seen an improvement, but I've seen definitely over the last 5 years that for many reasons, we've definitely seen it slow down, taking a lot longer and a lot more complexity in the approvals process.
So there is more complexity in the approvals, right? Okay.
Yeah, and that could be due to just the scale of projects. And so I guess we haven't seen improvement. We are seeing some, obviously, the reforms that are going on now, and we have seen a real effort from the government to address that. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say it's getting worse. They're definitely seeking to address it and move quicker and do things like the reforms, but also change how they're trying to manage and get things through in a timely basis. So I guess the best way to think about it too is we've had this EPBC Act for 20 years as well, and it's more recently become more of an issue. So I think reform is great, and I think it's appropriate. But there's also things we could probably do in the implementation, both now and with the new legislation, to make sure it's timely and moves quicker. Because the main thing we want is certainty. So whether it's under this act or a future act, I think industry needs certainty as to what's expected and how we deliver it. So I think there's been probably a shift in expectations sometimes during approvals, which is really frustrating and takes a lot of time and makes it, you've got to repeat a lot of work. But how we address that is firstly finding a site and trying to minimize our impacts as much as possible, and then working to, you've almost got to, we talk about raising the bar. So it's not just at a community level. You've got to think about raising the bar across your project. And so a lot of our projects, we think about what's somewhere that's above and beyond, because that's probably where expectations are going to be by the time this is coming for approval. So a good example for that is Gawara Baya, a project of ours in North Queensland. We've got a biodiversity net gain strategy, which means at a regional level, we want to make sure that biodiversity has a better outcome overall as to when we started on the project. And you can do that through like pest management, existing threats, pest management, weed management, fire management, land use, because a lot of the sites we're going to are degrading already due to various impacts on the environment. And by being there, yes, there are impacts due to clearing, but you can actually improve the outcomes by having other controls, such as feral predator management, pest management. And that's really helped us to focus on the outcomes. And I think the biggest challenge at the moment is the Act really looks at only impacts, not the outcomes. So if we can look at a more holistic view as to those positive outcomes for a regional biodiversity, that could be a great breakthrough for how we assess these projects, because there is no zero impact project available, unfortunately. Every inch of this country is valuable, whether it be from an environmental, social, cultural aspect point of view. So we need to make sure that we've got a good way of assessing that and being more outcomes focused rather than just on the singular impact.
Sounds like out of that size portfolio, was it 30 billion potential development portfolio, development pipeline that you've got? How do you kind of whittle it down, or what's the process that you go to decide which is a viable site?
Yeah, a great question. It's definitely where our history came from. So we talked about finding a windy site. It's not just about it being windy. It's got to be windy at the right times of day. So there's a term diurnal, meaning windy at nighttime, and then low correlation, meaning it's windy when other places aren't windy. So that's generally the high level kind of macro assessment we'll do. Then thinking about where are the markets, where there's energy needed, where can it meet the demand. So demand is a key part of assessment too at a macro level. Where is there a demand for energy, and how can it be connected? Then when you go down at a site level, you're doing a multi-criteria analysis. It's not just here's the best wind, we'll put it here. You've got to assess that overlay, like I mentioned, environmental constraints, cultural constraints, social constraints, agricultural land use constraints,
Wow.
and really think about all those things. So there's a lot of work done, even just before even putting dots on a map around that multi-criteria assessment. And then you're also looking at grid and how you're going to connect it to the grid. And what are the constraints in that grid network? Is there a transmission line there now? Is it going to be a future transmission? So a lot of that work is done at a high level, and then you start progressing through the feasibility, assessing things like wind, but then doing some initial environmental surveys, doing some grid studies, doing grid inquiries to see what that's like, then testing the market from a demand point of view as well. And then, as I mentioned, engagement. So making sure we're talking to the community landholders about what they need and want, and how do we coexist with land use. A lot of our sites are on cattle grazing, and that's an amazing coexistence kind of story there. They can graze right up to the turbine. It's a real minimal impact. Other construction, obviously, is a large impact, so you need to manage the impacts there. But once you're at operational, they can really go back to how they were farming land previously with a bunch of new roads they can utilise as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Let's talk about the turbines themselves. So over the last few years, the turbines generally have been getting larger and larger. Could you give for the listeners an idea of the size and scale of a typical turbine at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. It really has taken off the last few years in sizes. So we're looking at 6 to 8 megawatt size machines at the moment. And that's just the generator size. The other aspects of a turbine is the hub height. So the point where I guess the center of the turbine is, and then blade length. And all of those combine to help yield as to what you get from a site. So I think standard at the moment, we're looking around the 150 metre hub height, blades around 80 odd metres, and that would be fairly standard at the moment. I think there's going to be a natural technical limit as to how big you can get mainly due to logistics, I think, because how do you get the blades and turbine sections to site and build them with the cranes available?
Yes.
So I think bigger is always better from a wind yield, but you got to deal with the realities of the world where you can't just keep going bigger and bigger. And generator size the same. You need the generator size to match the yield you're harnessing with the tip length and the hub height.
I mean, it's great having these windy sites, but I was speaking to another developer and we're talking about that on windy days, which you typically get, that's when your lifting equipment is getting close to capacity as well. So that sort of limits things, the higher that you get up. Yeah,
funny. Yeah, just trying to build a wind farm and you have windy there during the day.
Days.
Again, the diurnal profile helps. So yeah. And it's the wind sites, as I said, it's not the windiest, it's consistent wind. So it doesn't always mean that you're shutting down cranes, but I won't pretend to be an expert in heavy lifts, but it's definitely a consideration. And often where they are, they're quite remote sometimes. So it's more of a logistical challenge than a technical one. It's great to see the big things being lifted, but it's the logistics of getting, I think we're going to have 500 people on site for Gawara Baya. There's no real local town nearby, so we're building a camp on site for that. Those sort of challenges to make sure we're getting that logistics right. The offsite roads is a key focus. How do we get the turbines from port to the site? For Gawara Baya, we're having to go the long way via Charles Towers up Kennedy Development Road. That's in northwest Queensland for those listening. We're upgrading three bridges. So again, challenge, but a great outcome for the regional community that we're upgrading infrastructure that can be utilised from a legacy point of view as well. But that's often the logistics side of getting the big bits to site is probably the biggest challenge, and the critical path often is how do you get the blades and turbines to site from the port, and then the construction, putting it all together. Not easy, but it's probably less risky than just getting the stuff there.
Yeah. Perhaps we could talk about the cost and how costs have increased, and you'll be able to sort of verify this. Someone mentioned to me the other day that their estimation was that wind projects have pretty much doubled over the last 5 years. Is there any truth in that, or what are you seeing?
Without being it depends. Yeah. Each site is different. Doubling, I'm sure if you chose a certain data point at a certain time, you could say that if you're pulling per megawatt rates, but it depends again on the size and scale, especially when you got things like turbine size moving. There is a few variables to really say that. There's definitely cost pressures though. I'd say the industry was expecting it to flatten out, but then I think there's a lot of global pressures across all supply chains that caused cost increases, whether it be inflation, supply chain. They were some big kind of corrections that happened in the market. And I don't think we've recovered from that yet, to be honest. So that's definitely something that's impacted cost. Complexity as well. So getting big is good from a wind yield point of view. It makes it a bit harder. And also scale. I think there's a real efficiency of scale, but there's a complexity of scale. Like I talked about, there's some fixed costs that really ramp up when you start going to bigger projects. It makes it overall more efficient, but there's still some pretty big costs you need to manage, like camps, logistics, remote sites. So all the easy sites are kind of gone in the country. So anywhere you're going now is pretty hard for various reasons. So I think that's probably increase some of that cost that you're talking to there. I think generally we need to do more probably for the cost to come down. So there's an industry.
Economies of scale.
Yeah, and it's not just bigger sites, it's more sites. We need to be doing more so the industry and the workforce and the skills can see that innovation, that factory line of work to really get that innovation and doing better. They're localized because it's not just a turbine cost. It's actually, we're seeing it's a balance of plant, we call it the BOP, civil and electrical balance of plant we're seeing a large increase there. So how do we get that better? How do we manage that? Is a key aspect. Some of the things we're doing is from a turbine point of view, working really closely with the OEMs and making sure we're focusing on that technological innovation. So not just the bigger and better turbines, but there's different turbine models coming out all the time around the world. Australia's 1% of the global market on turbines. So we punch well above our weight to get that interest because we're a good market, but we really need to engage to make sure we're getting the best for the Australian market out of that big global resource that is out there from an OEM point of view. How we do that is we keep a competitive process. So we go competitive for our turbines every time. So we keep it competitive as long as possible, which means we're always getting the best and the most recent model rather than aligning with a certain provider, which is great from a certainty point of view, but then you lose that competitiveness and you really lose that ability to get the best price. Because as you mentioned, price, affordability is key in the energy transition. We can't get lazy and just think, well, it costs what it costs. We can't accept that as an industry because something else will come along and be more competitive as well. So we need to make sure we're focusing on cost. Keeping competition sounds obvious, but keeping competition, the procurement process, and then also split contracting. So that's something that's come around. It was innovative at the time. I think there's more and more people doing it, but it means not trying to wrap it all up to a single contractor of both turbine and balance of plant and grid connection. Split contracting allows you to really reduce that risk cost that a contractor will place on a project to bundle it all up for you. And that's really reduces some of the cost as well. It means you've got to own the risk, but in the end of the day, owners kind of own the risk anyway, no matter where it goes. If you try and contract out risk, you'll end up paying for it somewhere.
Yes. Yeah. Are you looking at any offshore wind opportunities?
No, not at the moment. We have looked at it a lot. And again, we're not looking at, so I don't want to talk too much about offshore wind, but I think when you think about where offshore wind has real place, it's when there aren't good onshore wind sites available because it's more expensive, right? And we're seeing wind profiles onshore that would match that we get offshore. So we think there's so much opportunity onshore in Australia because we've got that land mass. So we'd find there's definitely a time and a place for offshore possibly in the transition. But right now, I said affordability is key to the transition. We got to go for the lowest cost, LCOE, lowest cost of electricity. That is onshore wind at the moment, paired with solar, hybrid sites, so wind battery, solar battery sites. That's the low end of the cost curve. And I think we'll be there for a while if we do that right.
And out of that $30 billion portfolio, what's the next 5 years looking like? What's the kind of, I mean, I don't know if you can talk to the spend or perhaps,
No, definitely. So it's fairly Queensland focused. We established ourselves in Queensland in Kennedy and we secured a number of sites a number of years ago due to the wind profile we're finding. Queensland itself, North Queensland's got a really premium wind resource due to that diurnal nature and the low correlation with other wind sites on the NEM. So we've got one in North Queensland, 60 k's west of Ingham called Gawara Baya. That's about $1.5 billion project. That'll be closing in the next 3 months. We'll be looking at. So that's really exciting. That's the 500 people. They'll take 2 to 3 years to build and connect to the grid. Really exciting. And then that's happening next year, and they'll take 2 to 3 years. And we've got the Bungaman wind farm, which is in the Western Downs, again, about 80 k's to the east of Wandoan in the Western Downs region. That's 1.4 gigawatts. That's 200 odd turbines. Gawara Baya, is 400 megawatts, about 60 turbines. That Bungaman is about 4 billion probably total. So quite a large, huge project there. So, and that'll start construction in 2027 and take again about 2-3 years to build and connect and get online. That's got a PPA that'll go through to power industrial loads in Gladstone, which is really exciting. The biggest PPA on the NEM. So that'll keep us very busy over the next 5 years. So it's about 5 billion over the next 5 years, all in Queensland. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, great. And just for listeners, a PPA is power purchase agreement.
Yeah, so that's part of the way we really get that certainty on a project and a power purchase agreement. We're customer focused as a developer, so often we'll start the engagement a lot earlier than when you normally would, because it's really important to understand where the demand is for your project and really helps with that, I guess, engagement and bankability from a project.
Yeah. Have you faced many grid connection constraints? What's the kind of approach been to that?
Yeah, so I think we talked about EPBC, and I think when I joining Windlab in 2021, I think grid was probably seen as the biggest challenge for the industry. And it's probably just been overtaken for now by EPBC, and maybe the reforms will take us back to normal transmission, and grid will be back front and centre. I think there's two elements to grid connection. There's the actual poles and wires connecting, and then there's a grid connection process, a technical GPS modelling. Don't ask me what that acronym stands for, Andy. But it's they're the kind of two aspects. I think it is seen as a risk across the industry, but some time ago, Windlab kind of thought, okay, it's a risk, but how do we turn this into opportunity? And we've done that through an internal team. So we've got an internal grid team of engineers, up to 10 people, that look at the technical grid connection requirements, that GPS modelling, and they're able to do it in-house and really look at that system engineering that you need to do to connect to the grid. That really de-risks it for us, because we can turn things around and move a lot quicker and go through that process. It means you can assess parts of the grid that otherwise would be you couldn't connect because it's too weak, and then actually make the grid stronger through to that innovation. So there's a technical kind of grid system modelling, that innovation that you can get through different kits, like grid forming inverters. You can add with batteries with the wind farm, so you're actually making the system stronger, and then following it through to actually deliver it on site, because it's great modelling something, but then making sure it happens on site is another thing as well. So across those three elements, we've really we've flipped it on its head and turned it into an opportunity for us. It's definitely something that's one of our strongest elements as Windlab. Definitely got the history in wind, but now grid is definitely a real key feather in the bow. And an example is Gawara Baya. It's North Queensland, no surprises there. North Queensland's a weak part of the grid. It's right at the top of the NEM. We were able to connect there for Gawara Baya and make the grid actually stronger due to the grid forming inverters with the wind farm, and that really allows us to connect into places that would be challenging for others.
Mm. What further policy or regulatory reforms would kind of help, not just Windlab, but the whole industry?
Yeah, I think I've talked about approvals processes.
Just approval, back to the approvals. Yeah.
So EPBC, but stepping back, like I said, reform is one thing, implementation's another. And I might just digress to, I read a book recently, Abundance Ways to Recline. I know it's doing the rounds in Canberra. It was around some challenges in North America, the USA, where legislation that came about in the 70s to protect the environment for good reason was implemented, and now they're seeing that same legislation weaponized to stop development in generally democratic or left-leaning states because of all these controls I've put in place for good reason. And actually, they can't do things like high-speed rail or renewable energy because those constraints are being used in anger in the implementation side. And so I think we run the risk of approaching the same place here in Australia, where we're trying to stop the bad stuff from happening, which is, we definitely don't want that happening. And I think there isn't a choice between renewables and damage to the environment. You can do both. You can protect the environment, like I mentioned, through biodiversity net gain, and good outcomes for the environment, while still achieving the energy transition and delivering big projects like wind farms. And so I guess that dilemma that as a client talked about in that book, and trying to move away from those restrictions, I guess, in those reforms, and making sure through implementation or reform that you're not constraining doing the stuff we need to do. And I raised it with Al Gore recently. He was out for a speaking tour, and I got the opportunity to have lunch, and and asked him, I said, what do you think about this dilemma? And he said, well, you've got to find a way to do the good things we have to do. That's just, it sounds very simple, doesn't it? The vice president. But so we've got to find a way to do the good things we have to do, whether it be through EPBC or other reforms that we need through grid connection. We've got to find a way to do it. And so I think mainly around that EPBC reforms, I think, is where we'll be looking at. And then moving on from there, you're probably looking at grid connections and things like that. But I think the key focus for the industry at the moment is the EPBC reforms, which I think got introduced yesterday. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. And what are you personally most excited about over the next few years?
I think those two projects are huge excitement. I think closing a project, I don't think a project's been closed this year for wind in Australia. And I keep saying the less we do each year, the more we have to do the next year. So the challenge gets greater from an energy transition point of view, from a market point of view, and from a climate point of view. So that, I guess, closing Gawara Baya will be huge excitement. That's been a long time coming. We've been working on that since 2019. So that's been a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of investment from our shareholders. So it'd be great to get that through to close and start building something. And then obviously Bungaman, biggest project on the NEM. That's a real exciting thing to do. So I think I'm excited enough just by those two opportunities in the next 5 years. And I think if I look back and see those being delivered, they'll be great. But there's a lot of other things we're looking in our future portfolio, which is really exciting. And kind of the next 5 years is really about delivery. And then, looking at the post-2030 world, it's the market's really going to have to think about how it's going to deliver that, because there's going to be a real need to move. I know it feels like we're moving quickly now. It's not fast enough. So how are we going to do things at scale and quickly in the 2030s to deliver the market need? Because there's going to be a lot of need for new generation, and it's quite the opportunity for the industry. If we do this well, it's a huge opportunity, but it's not going to wait around for us. If we do it poorly or we do it inefficiently, there'll be another solution. So I think it's about meeting that challenge, both in the near term of delivering, getting projects away, doing it well. And off the back of that, it's really ramping up and being match fit for the 2030s, where it's just going to have to go to the next level.
Match fit, I like it, yeah. Can you foresee a shortage of labour then at that point when it starts to...
Probably not popular view, but it'd be a good problem to have, to be honest, because there's not enough happening. So a shortage of labour means we've actually got more projects closing than we can resource. So I welcome that day. But yeah, I think labour's is something we need to consider, especially in Queensland with the Olympics coming, other infrastructure projects. That's going to have to be a consideration. So definitely, I think labour, it's the logistics side of things. We need to be considering that and making sure we're looking ahead of that. And I know both state and federal governments are looking at skills and want to make sure the industry is investing in that skills development, capacity building. And that's why we work a lot with universities, TAFE colleges in the regions, of how can we skill up that workforce to make sure they're seeing a pathway there and see that certainty. The hardest thing at the moment is by not having that pipeline of work, it's very hard for people to see that they've got this ability to have a long-term career when projects are kind of starting, not happening a lot. So as I said, it's chicken or the egg. We can't kind of build this workforce ready to go. We've got to kind of get the project going.
Get the momentum going.
Get the demand. It's supply demand. So I don't think the workforce will be there till we have the demand. And I just don't think we've got that critical mass of demand of projects coming through the system yet.
How can the audience follow what Windlab is doing?
Best way is on LinkedIn, probably, if you're on there from a social media point of view. So that's a really good way to keep up to date. There's also our website, windlab.com, and that's got links to all our project websites like Gawara, Baya and Bungaman and some of our other project portfolio that we're working on. So, and that'll have more details. You can sign up to emails for newsletters around each project that we're working on, because that's one of the forms how we keep people informed, not just local community, but regional stakeholders. So that's the best way to follow.
Yeah, fantastic. Anything else that you'd like to share with the audience?
No, just I guess thanks for having me, Andy, and I'm keen to chat as we move forward in the energy transition.
Thanks so much, Nathan. Yeah, I'm sure the listeners and viewers will thoroughly enjoy that. Such a diverse conversation, and we really commend you and your team for raising the bar, as you put it, on every aspect of the project. So wish you all the best.
Thanks, Andy.
Cheers. Thanks for tuning into today's episode of Exploring Clean Energy. I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. I'm keen to continue to bring you the best experts and most interesting projects. So if you have an exciting story to share, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or email. I'm Andy Marsland, and hopefully see you next time.